you to have a think about. I think a really easy quotation to remember that's repeated throughout the poem, making it even more memorable. And there is loads you can say about it. So to start with, them or them, they would be the grammatical version of that, are the British government and the British education system seem to be the most likely, and they're both institutions. In this quote, these institutions are presented as very powerful because they have the power to determine what knowledge children are given in schools. And obviously the knowledge you are given in school and the things and facts that you are told determine your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions on certain topics. So the institutions in this quote are being presented in a very powerful way. Agard goes on to say in the poem, dem tell me what dem want to tell me. Now, that suggests that they're selective with the history that they allow to go on to the curriculum, again suggesting that they're controlling and powerful in the influence that they have on people as they control the knowledge that people are given. My next question was, why do you think Agard writes in his Caribbean accent and dialect, them, rather than the standard they? Now, this seems to be a rejection of British education standards, which I've written here. So the phonetic spelling, and phonetic just means spelling something how you would say it in your accent or dialect. So phonetic spelling in the non-grammatical dem is him rejecting the British education standards. He's writing a poem which you would expect to be written in standard English in his phonetic accent and dialect, his Caribbean accent and dialect. So that's him rejecting the standards that have been imposed by the British education system. But it just reminds us how controlled we are by these institutions, again reinforcing that they are powerful. The fact that we all write in the same way reinforces the power that education has. It's not always a bad thing, but in this poem he's drawn attention to the disadvantages of a government deciding the knowledge that all its people under its control are given. So I think that's mostly it for this quote. That final question was, why does he use third person pronoun? And that's to create a distance between himself, the speaker, and the government. So the government are the them, and he's using the third person pronoun for that, and third person pronouns do create distance. And that's just reinforcing how his curriculum, this speaker's curriculum, who we can assume is being educated in the Caribbean, if it's likely to be Agard himself, the speaker, given the similarities between the speaker in the poem and Agard, who was educated in Guyana in the Caribbean, which was under British colonial rule. So it could link to the fact that the British government were distant, they weren't actually in Guyana, but they were influencing the education that those people were given. So it just reinforces how powerful the British government were, particularly during the time of colonial rule, but also how much power institutions like the education system have. So this quotation really emphasises the power of the British government, particularly in the era of colonial rule, which was where Britain were dominant and they essentially owned other countries until they gave them their independence. They were in charge, they were the authority. The next quotation is, bandage up my eye with my own history, blind me to my own identity. Now, the speaker, potentially Agard himself, is accusing the British government, the education system here, of denying him his own culture, his own heritage, his own background, his own history. And the words bandage and blind suggest an injury. So it suggests that it's having a very negative effect on him, not being able to learn about his own culture, his own heritage, his own background, his own history is damaging. Again, reinforcing just how powerful the institution of the education system is and the British government during the time of colonial rule, when they could actually cause harm to people by not allowing them to access the own cultural heritage and background, and he sees that as very damaging, and it's had a very damaging impact on him. That's the impression we get from the speaker there. It suggests that he feels hurt, frustrated, angry at the education that he's being given by the British government and by the education system. The next quotation, I like this one, is "Dem tell me about the dish run away with the spoon, but dem never tell me about Nanny de Maroon." I like this one because it's a comparison. So Nanny de Maroon led the slaves who resisted the British colonisers, and she lost her life in battle. Colonisers should be an S, not a Z. It's an American keyboard, sorry. And I've said in the question here, the speaker is comparing what he is taught compared to what he isn't. And that should say, how do you think he feels? How do you think he feels about the content he's taught? So the dish that ran away with the spoon is a nursery rhyme, which seems ridiculous. So we're being taught these nursery rhymes that have no real value. The knowledge of nursery rhymes doesn't really benefit us in any way other than potentially entertain us when we're really little. But he's taught these nursery rhymes, which are just very much part of British tradition and British culture, reinforcing how much British culture was forced upon those in the countries under colonial rule. And they're wasting time teaching them these nursery rhymes that are part of like British tradition, but they're not telling them about figures as important as Nanny de Maroon. Now, this woman led the slaves who resisted the British colonisers, and she lost her life. She would be for many people seen as a hero. So we get the impression that the speaker is angry, he's outraged. He's outraged that he could be taught a trivial nursery rhyme, but not taught about such a significant woman. So you really hear in the speaker's anger and frustration with the British education system and the British government here, and what they're choosing to teach. It just seems so ridiculous that they would learn these nursery rhymes but not learn about truly heroic figures. And that's not just in the Caribbean either. Why aren't we learning about these figures still in our history lessons, which is a problem? Why is history so whitewashed, which means we seem to put white figures on a pedestal and celebrate those, whereas we have sort of Black History Month, whereas we should just look at all history together rather than history that's biased towards white people. The next quote is, "Dem tell me about Columbus in 1492, but what happened to the Caribs and Arawaks too?" Now, the Caribs and Arawaks were the native people who actually lost their homes as a result of the European colonisers. In British history, Christopher Columbus is very much portrayed as a hero. We've got the nursery rhyme, we all laughed at Christopher Columbus when he said the world was round, and he's very celebrated in our culture. The speaker here, presumably John Agard, seems to question, why are we celebrating Christopher Columbus in history but not thinking about the people who were affected by his discoveries? Once he discovered these lands, British colonisers went in and Europeans went into the Caribbean islands and took over completely and imposed their culture and imposed their ways and pushed the native people out. Why aren't we learning about that? Why are we only focusing on Columbus as a hero rather than looking at the damaging impacts of what he did? And again, you get the impression that the speaker is angry here. But what happened to the Caribs and Arawaks too? The question suggests like an angry and confrontational tone. He's frustrated that we're not thinking about the effects of colonisation and the damaging effects on the native people that the empire had. So you can hear his angry tone here. Again, it reinforces the power of the British government, the power of white people in these quotations, the power of the education system that can manipulate history to make white people sound completely heroic by omitting the other side of the story. So again, it just reinforces how powerful institutions are and how manipulative they can be, particularly through what they choose to teach us in education.